Hey, good morning, everybody. Jordan Peterson has been sentenced to re-education in Canada by the Ontario College of Psychologists, apparently for wrongthink, for saying things that were not sanctioned by them, even though they've got nothing to do with his actual practice of clinical psychology. Now, he is a qualified clinical psychologist, and obviously now he's a worldwide, world-renowned media personality because he speaks truth in so many areas, and it's a breath of fresh air to almost everybody who's right thinking and who is just like absolutely fed up of all the insanity and the suffocating wokery which is plaguing our civilization. But he tweeted out what they wanted to do to him here a couple of days ago. So I'll just read some of the string of tweets he wrote saying what this governing body of his profession in Canada wanted him to do. So essentially be re-educated like a naughty little boy for doing naughty things that weren't approved or having thoughts that weren't approved. So he put out this series of tweets here. Breaking. The Ontario College of Psychologists has demanded that I submit myself to mandatory social media communication retraining with their experts for, among other crimes, retweeting Pierre Poilievre and criticizing Justin Trudeau and his political allies. Well, there's an awful lot you can criticize Justin Trudeau about, and that should be something that you are allowed to do freely in a free society. I mean, even he himself goes on and bangs on about freedom and democracy, even though he's done more to destroy freedom and democracy in Canada than anyone ever has done in the history of that nation, and is one of the worst in the Western world over the last 3-year period with all that's gone on there. So, you know, whatever you think, you should be allowed to criticize the Prime Minister or any MP if you don't agree with their political positions. And this other guy, Pierre Poilievre, is the current leader of the opposition, I believe, in Canada. So, you know, if you want to say something, if you're a public figure and you want to express an opinion, you should be allowed to do that. You shouldn't be brought up for re-education because you have the wrong opinions about something that actually has got nothing to do with your job. And if you're actually practicing clinical psychology, you're there one-on-one with a patient, you're not going to be talking about politics. That's something that is way outside what you do when you're actually practicing. But there you go. So he goes on and says, I am to take a course of such training with reports documenting my progress or face an in-person tribunal and suspension of my right to operate as a licensed clinical psychologist. So there you go. It's basically take this retraining course, this re-education course, or you'll be kicked out of your governing body, will suspend you and expel you and take away your license to practice. So basically, he's been threatened with actually his livelihood being taken away. Now, of course, Jordan Peterson is now a worldwide media figure, so he has other sources of income apart from being a clinical psychologist. But he's an exception to the rule. Most people in most countries who are practicing clinical psychologists don't have a large source of income outside their main practice and their main job. So this is a huge threat, not so much to him financially, obviously professionally it is, but if someone wasn't in his position, if that's all someone had and that was their sole or main source of income, they would pretty much be coerced into doing re-education. And they're saying here, if you don't, your license is going to be suspended. We're going to take away your livelihood. And then people that happens to, they may lose their house, which could then lead to family breakdown and all kinds of other things, which is what happens. This is a terrible and odious threat to make to someone, just to say, if you express the wrong opinions we're going to take away your livelihoods. And this is going way, way beyond just the sort of no platforming and cancel culture we had 5 years ago. It was like, well, universities would not give you a platform to speak on. But this is now threatening people's livelihoods and saying, well, if you don't get into line, we're going to make you poor. We're going to destroy your life. And that's absolutely wicked from this governing body of clinical psychologists in Ontario to do this. So Jordan Peterson goes on and explains what's happened here. He says, about a dozen people from all over the world submitted complaints about my public statements on Twitter and the Joe Rogan show over a 4-year period out of the 15 million who follow me on social media, claiming that I had harmed people, not them, but just people in general, with my views. In its wisdom, the Ontario College of Psychologists decided to pursue these complaints, even though they could have dismissed them as vexatious. I have been accused of harming people, although none of the complainants involved in the current action were clients of mine, past or present, or even acquainted with any of my clients. And even though many of them falsely claimed that they were or had been clients of mine and were allowed by the Ontario College of Psychologists to have their complaints investigated despite this falsehood. So 12 people complained about him over a 4-year period who weren't even his clients. They weren't directly harmed by him in any way because of his practice of clinical psychology. They're actually just people, random people who from around the world who complained, oh, I didn't like what he said on Twitter. Therefore, I'm making a complaint about him and saying people may have been harmed. Well, the people who were his clients, none of the people who were his actual clients, who actually did clinical psychology with, complained at all. So this case should have just been thrown out as soon as it came in the door, because, it's just nonsense and ridiculous. This, the word vexatious there actually describes the nature of these complaints. They seem to be malicious and have the specific aim of getting him deplatformed, which looks like what they are going to do by this coercion to either be re-educated or fired. Or suspended, not fired, suspended from practicing. So he goes on, if I comply, the terms of my re-education and my punishment will be announced publicly. I've already had the second most serious category of punishment levied against me and have been deemed a high risk to re-offend. Canadians, your physicians, lawyers, psychologists and other professionals are now so intimidated by their commissar overlords that they fear to tell you the truth. This means that your care and legal counsel has been rendered dangerously unreliable. Okay, to reiterate, I face public disgrace, mandatory political re-education, disciplinary hearing, and potential loss of my clinical licensing for agreeing with Pierre Poilievre and criticising our standing Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. So there you go. They are attacking free speech, no end, in Canada, but this is happening all over the Western world. But Canada and seemingly also New Zealand on the other side of the world are going even further ahead of most other places in the Western world in trying to destroy free speech and destroy anybody who says anything against the narrative, including expressing political opinions about, all the issues that are here, lockdown, gender ideology, and so on. Jordan Peterson burst onto the scene, I think it was 7 years ago, when he said he is refusing to comply with compelled speech. There was bills going through, I think it was the Ontario Parliament, to say, you must affirm if someone says they're a different sex than what they are, you must affirm that. And he was saying, well, no, I'm not going to affirm something that is not real. People can identify as what they're like, but I'm not going to agree with something that is clearly untrue. And, I think most right-thinking people would agree with that. I mean, if you have to say that someone is something that they're not, or something is something that it's not, then we are in Orwellian territory where, Winston Smith is in the prison about to get beaten with the guy saying, how many fingers am I holding up? This is 5 fingers. And if you don't say this is 5 fingers, then you're going to be beaten again. This is the kind of place we're at. Not with physical punishment yet, but this is, actual punishment, taking away someone's livelihood and making them poor for not agreeing with something that is untrue, or not shutting your mouth about things that people should be allowed the freedom to comment on. And we need to stand up against this. I know there's protests going on in Canada next week. Shockingly and sadly, it seems that there's hardly anybody in his actual profession that has come out to support him, probably because they're scared and frightened as well. Because if other people who are clinical psychologists or medical professionals in Canada come out and support him, well, they might find themselves in the same situation of them being forced to go through some kind of humiliating re-education. And if they don't, then they will find themselves out of a job as well. Now, you don't want any kind of black mark on your record. I mean, so these professional bodies, if you like, are now acting like tyrannical agents of the state, which is crushing our freedom of thought, freedom of belief, freedom of conscience. And we have to infiltrate these organizations to ensure that they uphold freedom, but ultimately get into positions of power in government and parliament and state parliaments and local governments in order to kick out the people who make these kind of laws and to ensure that other bodies uphold our freedom of speech. Now, there is a very, very good party in Canada that upholds freedom and freedom of speech. It's the People's Party of Canada, run by Maxime Bernier. A very, very good party. They would be analogous to the Heritage Party in the UK. So, if you're in Canada, I would recommend you join them, support them, and stand for them, and take back your country in Canada. If you're in the UK, of course, as I always say, the Heritage Party is here for you to stand up for freedom of speech. And one of the first things we will do if we get into Parliament is to put forward a freedom bill, which hopefully will become a Freedom Act, which will repeal all of the terrible laws that have been put in place over the last 13 years of fake Conservative government and 13 years of New Labour government before that. Things like the Equality Act, which gives people with protected characteristics extra rights and special rights to accuse other people of hate crimes and hate speech, which then impinges on their freedom of speech. Things coming up like the online safety bill, which if it gets through Parliament will be a draconian and tyrannical suppression of free speech online, on the internet and on social media, and all kinds of other things that have been put in place over the last 25, 26 years. We need to reverse all of those things. So if you're in the UK, as I always say, please do join me in the Heritage Party. Stand to be a candidate in the elections coming up locally on the 4th of May, and also the next general election as well. And please also, if you would, give me a thumbs up to this video. Do write a comment, and I'll try and write back to some of you. And join the Heritage Party, and please subscribe to my channel as well if you can. Okay, thank you. And of course, we support Jordan Peterson. We support Jordan Peterson and his freedom, and this plot to force him to go through this humiliating and Orwellian re-education program is just nonsense. And we stand against all of these kind of things, and we support freedom of speech. So Thanks for watching, and God bless you all.